"Mummy doesn't want to wake up," says little girl as she knocks on the millionaire's door. He turns pale instantly. Before we dive into this incredible story of redemption and family, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. You're about to witness a transformation that will touch your heart. Enjoy the story. The winter rain hammered against the windows of Daniel Blackwood's mansion like bullets from heaven. At 52, the billionaire tech mogul had grown accustomed to isolation, his empire built on cold calculations and ruthless ambition. Tonight was no different, or so he thought. The desperate pounding at his front door shattered the silence. Like thunder, Daniel's blood ran cold as he opened the heavy oak door. There, soaked to the bone and trembling with terror, stood a small girl no older than 5. Her dark hair clung to her pale face, but it was her eyes, those piercing blue eyes, that stopped his heart. They were identical to his own. "Mama won't wake up," she cried, her tiny voice breaking with desperation. "Papa, please save her." The word Papa hit Daniel like a lightning bolt. He stared at this child, searching for answers in features that mirrored his own with impossible precision. "You promised you'd always protect me," Sophie sobbed, clutching a crumpled photograph. "You're my papa, right? Mama showed me your pictures and said you'd take care of me." Daniel's mind raced. He had no memory of promises, no recollection of this child. Yet the resemblance was undeniable, the same strong jawline, the same determined chin, those unmistakable Blackwood eyes. "Mama's on the kitchen floor sleeping for so long and won't answer me," Sophie explained through chattering teeth. "She taught me your address. She always said, if Mama gets very sick, find this man." Without hesitation, Daniel grabbed his coat and keys. Racing through the storm to a modest apartment across town, he found Elena Martinez unconscious on the cold linoleum floor. As paramedics worked frantically, Sophie clung to his arm. "Papa, save Mama," she whispered with absolute faith. At the hospital, as doctors fought to stabilize Elena from severe diabetic shock, Daniel stared at the little girl who called him father. In one night, his carefully controlled world had crumbled, and somehow, he'd never felt more alive. While Elena fought for her life in the ICU, Daniel found himself in uncharted territory, caring for a child who believed he was her hero. Sophie curled up in the uncomfortable hospital chair, her small hand gripping his with unwavering trust. "Mama always said you were saving the world," she whispered innocently, "but that you'd come back for us someday." After 36 agonizing hours, Elena's eyes finally fluttered open. The confrontation that followed would change everything. "You don't remember me, do you?" Elena's voice was weak but steady as she studied Daniel's confused expression. "Corporate gala, 6 years ago. You were drowning your sorrows after the Meridian deal fell through." The memory hit him like a freight train. The hotel bar, the beautiful waitress with kind eyes, the night of reckless abandon after losing his biggest contract. Elena Martinez, he'd been too drunk, too devastated to remember her name. "I tried to reach you when I found out I was pregnant," Elena continued, tears streaming down her face. "But you'd changed everything, phone numbers, addresses. Your company said you were unreachable during the restructuring." Daniel's chest tightened. While he'd been rebuilding his empire, she'd been building a life, their daughter's life. "I couldn't let Sophie grow up thinking her father didn't want her," Elena whispered. "I showed her magazine articles, told her you were busy but that you'd promised to protect her. When my diabetes got worse, I taught her to find you just in case." The paternity test results arrived the next morning, 99.7% probability. Daniel Blackwood was indeed Sophie's father, standing in that sterile hospital room, staring at the little girl who shared his eyes and the woman who'd carried his secret for 6 years. Daniel felt something crack open inside his chest. Not his heart breaking, but his heart finally learning to beat. "Daddy." Sophie's voice was small and hopeful. "Are you staying with us now?" For the first time in his ruthless, calculated life, Daniel Blackwood made a decision based purely on love. "Yes, sweetheart. Daddy's never leaving again." Elena needed a full week of hospitalization to stabilize her diabetes. Daniel found himself alone with Sophie in his sprawling mansion. Billionaire who could negotiate million-dollar deals but had no idea how to make a 5-year-old lunch. "It's so big," Sophie whispered, her small voice echoing through the marble foyer. "Are there monsters hiding here?" Daniel's heart clenched. He quickly called Mrs. Chen, an emergency nanny service, who arrived within hours and immediately began teaching him the basics of fatherhood. Children need routine, Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Chen explained patiently as Sophie explored the massive house with wide, uncertain eyes, consistent mealtimes, bedtime stories, and above all security. But Sophie was far from secure. The trauma of finding her mother unconscious had left deep scars. She refused to sleep alone, waking screaming from nightmares about Mama not waking up. Daniel found himself sleeping on the floor beside her small bed, his powerful presence the only thing that calmed her terror. During the day, while fielding increasingly frustrated calls from his business partners, Daniel watched Sophie draw obsessively, page after page of the same image, 3 stick figures holding hands. "Who are they, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "That's me, Mama, and you, Daddy." "Daniel," she replied with heartbreaking innocence. "We're a family now, right?" The simple word hit him like a tsunami. Family, something he'd never had, never wanted, never understood. Yet here was this precious little girl, looking at him like he was her entire world, like he could solve any problem, fight any monster. His phone buzzed incessantly. Robert Sterling, his business partner, demanding explanations for missed meetings and delayed decisions. But when Sophie climbed into his lap during a conference call, showing him a drawing of their house with the happy family, Daniel found himself hanging up mid-sentence. For the first time in his empire-building life, something mattered more than money. Robert Sterling's voice cut through the mahogany-paneled boardroom like a blade. "This is unacceptable, Daniel. Your productivity has dropped 70% in 2 weeks." Daniel sat at the head of the conference table, his laptop displaying quarterly projections while his mind remained fixed on Sophie, who was home with Mrs. Chen, probably asking when Daddy Daniel would return. "The European investors are questioning our stability," Sterling continued, his cold eyes reflecting decades of ruthless ambition. "A personal situation cannot compromise billions in pending contracts." Daniel had built Blackwood Technologies from nothing, transforming it into a global empire through sheer determination and calculated risks. Every decision had been made with surgical precision, every relationship evaluated for strategic value, until now. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Sophie drew you a picture. She's asking if you're coming home for dinner." Home. The word still felt foreign on his tongue. "The Tokyo merger requires your immediate attention," Sterling pressed. 3 weeks in Asia, minimum. "The shareholders expect." "I understand what they expect," Daniel interrupted, his voice carrying the authority that had intimidated competitors for decades. "But my priorities have shifted." Sterling's expression darkened. "Priorities? You're jeopardizing everything we've built for a child who appeared out of nowhere. How do we even know she's really yours?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop. 10 degrees. Daniel's blue eyes, Sophie's blue eyes, turned to ice. "Watch your words very carefully, Robert." That evening, during a critical video conference with London investors, Sophie burst into his home office, tears streaming down her face. She'd had another nightmare, this time about Daniel disappearing like her mother almost had. "Daddy, don't leave me," she sobbed, climbing into his lap while 12 executives watched through the screen. Daniel faced a choice that would define everything: maintain his corporate image or comfort his terrified daughter. He muted the call and held Sophie, close, whispering reassurances until her breathing steadied. When he looked back at the screen, Sterling's face was a mask of barely controlled fury. "Gentlemen," Daniel announced calmly, "we'll reschedule this meeting. My daughter needs me." As he ended the call, Sophie looked up with those trust-filled eyes. "You chose me over work. Every time. Sweetheart, every single time." But Daniel knew Sterling wouldn't accept this new reality quietly. The war for his soul had only just begun. When Elena was finally discharged, Daniel insisted she and Sophie stay at the mansion during her complete recovery. The suggestion sparked their first real argument as adults. "I won't be your charity case," Elena declared, her pride as fierce as her exhaustion. Despite her pale complexion and the 4 bruises still visible on her arm, she stood defiantly. In the hospital corridor, "It's not charity," Daniel replied quietly. "It's what Sophie needs, what we all need." The truth was more complex. Elena's modest apartment had a broken elevator, no air conditioning, and neighbors who played music until dawn. Her medical bills had already maxed out 2 credit cards, and her diabetes medication costs were astronomical. Sophie, oblivious to the adult tension, grabbed both their hands. "Please, I want us all together." That first week at the mansion revealed the depth of Elena's struggles. She worked double shifts at 2 different restaurants while attending nursing school part-time, all while managing a chronic illness. Daniel learned she'd been rationing her insulin to save money, a dangerous gamble that had nearly killed her. "Let me help," he offered one evening as they watched Sophie play in the garden. "Call it overdue child support." Elena's jaw tightened. "I've managed fine for 5 years. You nearly died, Elena. Sophie found you unconscious." His voice broke slightly. "I can't lose either of you now." Something in his tone made her walls crumble. They reached a delicate compromise. Daniel would cover all medical expenses and Sophie's educational needs, presented as paternal responsibilities rather than charity. Gradually, a routine emerged. Elena cooked dinner-real, homemade meals that filled the mansion with warmth it had never known. Daniel discovered the joy of bedtime stories, Sophie's laugh becoming his favorite sound in the world. "Read The Princess one again," Sophie demanded, nestled between them on the couch. During these peaceful moments, Daniel caught Elena watching him with something like wonder. The cold, calculating billionaire was learning to be gentle, to put someone else's needs first. One evening, as they tucked Sophie into bed, she asked innocently, "Are you and Mama going to get married, so we can be a real family?" The question hung in the air between them. Elena's cheeks flushed pink, while Daniel felt his heart skip several beats. "Good night, sweetheart," Elena whispered, avoiding Daniel's intense gaze. But as they stood in the hallway after Sophie fell asleep, the air between them crackled with possibilities neither dared voice aloud. 3 weeks into their unconventional arrangement, Daniel discovered fatherhood was nothing like running a corporation and infinitely more rewarding. "Look, Daddy Daniel," Sophie exclaimed, her fingers dancing across the tablet screen as she created digital artwork. "I made a castle for the princess." Daniel watched in amazement as his 5-year-old daughter manipulated complex design software with intuitive ease. Her artistic talent was remarkable, but it was her logical approach to problem-solving that truly astounded him. "She has your analytical mind," Elena observed, joining them at the kitchen table where Daniel had set up his makeshift office. "But her creativity, that's all her own." Their Saturday trip to the aquarium became a revelation. Strangers, naturally, assumed they were a traditional family, and for the first time, Daniel didn't feel compelled to correct them. Sophie pressed her face against the massive tank, describing the fish with scientific precision that impressed even the staff. Marine biologist. But it was when Sophie stumbled and scraped her knee that Daniel truly understood the terror of parenthood. Blood so little, yet it sent him into complete panic. "Daddy, breathe," Elena said calmly, cleaning the wound with practiced efficiency. "She's fine. Kids get hurt, it's how they learn resilience." Sophie looked up at Daniel with those trusting, blue eyes. "You were scared for me, weren't you, Daddy?" "Terrified," he admitted honestly. She hugged him fiercely. "That's how I know you really love me. Mama taught me that people who love you worry when you're hurt." That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Elena found Daniel on the terrace, staring at the city lights. "You're learning," she said softly, joining him at the railing. "Am I? Sometimes I feel like I'm stumbling through this blindfolded." He turned to face her, vulnerability replacing his usual confidence. "What if I'm not enough for her? What if I can't give her what she needs?" Elena's expression softened. "You think love is about perfection. It's about showing up, Daniel, every day, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared." The space between them seemed to shrink. Daniel caught the faint scent of her perfume, remembered how it had felt to hold her 6 years ago. "Elena," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. She stepped closer, her hand almost touching his. "What are we doing here, Daniel? Really?" Before he could answer, Sophie's voice called from upstairs. "Mama, Daddy, I had a bad dream." They rushed to comfort her together, and as Daniel watched Elena soothe their daughter with gentle words and tender touches, he realized the answer to her question. They were becoming exactly what Sophie had drawn in her pictures of family. Sophie's 6th birthday approached like a milestone Daniel had never imagined celebrating. For 5 years, she'd blown out candles without him. This time would be different. "I want ponies and clowns, and a bouncy castle," Sophie announced during breakfast, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Daniel immediately reached for his phone to call the most exclusive party planning company in the city, but Elena's gentle hand stopped him. "Or," she suggested diplomatically, "we could have something more intimate, just a few friends from her new school." Daniel struggled with the concept. In his world, bigger meant better, more expensive meant more meaningful. But watching Sophie's face light up at the mention of her school friends, he realized this wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about making memories. They compromised beautifully. Daniel hired professional entertainers, but Alina insisted on baking the cake as 3-layer masterpiece decorated with Sophie's drawings of their family. The backyard was transformed into a princess wonderland, but kept intimate enough for genuine connection. Sophie wore a dress Alina had sewn by hand, complete with matching ribbons, and a custom tiara Daniel had commissioned from Tiffany's. She was their perfect princess. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Daniel said as Sophie leaned over the glowing candles. She closed her eyes tight, took a deep breath, and wished with her whole heart, "I wish Daddy Daniel stays my daddy forever and ever, and that Mama never gets sick." Again, when she opened her eyes, both Daniel and Alina were fighting back tears. The other parents, who had naturally assumed they were married, smiled warmly at the beautiful family moment. "Did your wish come true already?" asked 7-year-old Emma from Sophie's class. Sophie beamed. "The best wishes take time, but they always come true if you believe hard enough." As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Daniel found himself in the kitchen with Alina, cleaning up wrapping paper and party favors. The domestic simplicity felt more satisfying than any corporate victory. "She's never been this happy," Alina observed, watching Sophie play with her new toys through the window. "Neither have I," Daniel replied honestly. They worked in comfortable synchronization, Alina washing dishes while Daniel dried, moving round each other with an intimacy that felt both new and ancient. When Alina reached for a high shelf, Daniel stepped behind her to help, his chest brushing against her back. Time stopped. Alina turned slowly, trapped between Daniel and the counter, her breath catching as she looked up into his eyes. The same magnetic pull that had drawn them together 6 years ago surged between them, stronger now, deepened by shared purpose and growing love. "Alina," he whispered, his hands framing her face. "Daddy, Mama, come see my castle." Sophie's voice broke the spell, but neither pulled away immediately. "We should," Alina breathed. "Yes," Daniel agreed, but his thumb traced her cheek tenderly. "We should." Bay joined Sophie in the living room, but the electricity between them remained, charged with possibility and the promise of something beautiful, just beginning to bloom. The crisis hit like a hurricane on a Tuesday morning. Daniel's phone erupted with calls from their Asian subsidiary was hemorrhaging millions due to a supply chain catastrophe that threatened to collapse their entire Pacific operation. "You need to be on a plane tonight," Robert's voice crackled through the speaker. 10 days minimum, maybe 2 weeks. 3,000 jobs are on the line, not to mention the Yamamoto contract worth $800 million. Daniel stared at his calendar, his stomach dropping. Sophie's school presentation was Friday. All about my family, where she'd been practicing for weeks to tell her classmates about her daddy who came home. "I can't leave right now," Daniel said, aware of how the words sounded to Sterling. "Can I, or will not?" Sterling's tone turned arctic. "Because there's a significant difference, and our board won't appreciate either answer." That evening, Daniel sat on Sophie's bed, watching her rehearse her presentation with Alina. She'd created a poster board covered with family photos, drawings of their house, and a timeline of when Daddy came home to us. "And then I'll tell them about how Daddy teaches me about computers and how we make pancakes on Sunday mornings," Sophie explained seriously, her small finger tracing over a photo of them at the aquarium. Daniel's chest tightened. Missing this presentation meant missing the moment she'd officially claim him as her father in front of her peers. But failing to go to Seoul could cost thousands of jobs and potentially destroy everything he'd built professionally. Elena noticed his internal struggle. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, she found him in his study, staring at flight schedules and financial projections. "What if we came with you?" she suggested quietly. Daniel looked up, startled. "To Seoul?" "Alina, it's a business crisis, not a vacation. Sophie's never been out of the country. She could do her presentation via video call to her class. Imagining how impressed they'd be with her international family adventure." Elena's eyes sparkled with possibility. "I've never traveled anywhere exotic, and you'd have your family with you during a stressful time." The idea was unconventional, risky, and completely outside Daniel's methodical business approach. It was also brilliant. 3 days later, they landed in Seoul during a gentle snowfall. Sophie pressed her face against the taxi window, mesmerized by the neon signs with Korean characters, the bustling markets, and the ancient palaces nestled between gleaming skyscrapers. While Daniel spent 12-hour days restructuring contracts and negotiating with suppliers, Alina and Sophie explored Gyeongbokgung Palace, learned to make kimchi from a patient grandmother in Insadong, and collected stories to share. On Friday morning, Sophie sat in their hotel suite, facing Daniel's laptop, with Bukhanhanok village visible through the window behind her. Her American classmates watched in awe as she presented My International Family, showing photos of Korean temples, traditional dances, and herself wearing a beautiful hanbok. My daddy had to save lots of people's jobs, she explained Matava, so we came to help him. That's what families do, we stick together anywhere in the world. The Korean executives, who had joined the video call out of curiosity, were visibly moved. After Sophie finished, Mr. Park, their primary partner, approached Daniel privately. Your daughter speaks with great wisdom about family loyalty, he said with deep respect. In Korea, we value leaders who understand that business success means nothing without family harmony. You have both. The Seoul crisis was resolved successfully, but more importantly, Daniel realized something profound. His family didn't limit his capabilities, they expanded them. Sophie's presentation became legendary at her school. Alina fell in love with travel, and Daniel discovered that bringing his heart to his work made him a more effective, more respected leader. On the plane home, Sophie fell asleep between her parents, her head on Daniel's shoulder, while Alina held her small hand. Thank you, Daniel whispered to Alina across their sleeping daughter. For what? For showing me that love multiplies everything instead of dividing it. The ultimatum arrived exactly 1 week after their triumphant return from Seoul. Robert Sterling called an emergency board meeting, his silver hair perfectly styled and his expression carved from granite. Gentlemen, Sterling addressed the 12 board members seated around the polished conference table. We face a critical decision about Blackwood Technology's future leadership. Daniel sat at the head of the table, his jaw tense as Sterling opened a thick folder containing profit analysis, productivity reports, and competitor assessments. Since Daniel's domestic situation began, our quarterly earnings have declined 18%. We've lost 2 major contracts to rivals who don't have divided loyalties. The Singapore expansion has stalled, and the European partners are questioning our commitment. The numbers were brutal and undeniable. Daniel had always prided himself on data-driven decisions, and the data painted a clear picture. His transformation into a devoted father was costing the company millions. The choice is simple, Sterling continued ruthlessly. Return immediately to the 70-hour workweeks that built this empire, or sell your controlling stake to someone who will prioritize shareholder value above personal indulgences. Daniel felt the walls closing in. Every eye in that room belonged. 2 men who had sacrificed everything for wealth, marriages, relationships with their children, their health, their souls. They'd built kingdoms on the bones of their personal lives. For 2 sleepless weeks, Daniel buried himself in spreadsheets and strategic analysis, searching for a third option that didn't exist. The mathematics were merciless. He could save the company by abandoning his family, or save his family by potentially destroying thousands of jobs. Alina found him at 3 a.m. in his study, surrounded by empty coffee cups and financial projections, his head in his hands. You're killing yourself, she said softly, sitting beside him. I'm trying to find a way to save everything. His voice was raw with exhaustion and desperation. Elena took his hands in hers, her touch warm against his cold fingers. Daniel, look at me. When he met her eyes, she continued with heartbreaking courage. If you need to choose your company, Sophie and I will understand. I won't let you resent us for destroying everything you built. The generous offer shattered something inside him. Here was this incredible woman, willing to sacrifice her own happiness, their happiness, to free him from an impossible choice. You would do that? He whispered. I love you too much to be the reason you lose your life's work. But as Daniel stared into Elena's selfless eyes, he realized she'd misunderstood everything. The company wasn't his life's work, it had been his life's distraction from the emptiness where love should have lived. You're wrong, he said finally, his voice gaining strength. You and Sophie aren't destroying my life's work. You are my life's work now. The next morning, Daniel walked into that boardroom with absolute clarity. He placed a formal resignation letter in front of Sterling. alongside legal documents, transferring operational control. I'll retain 35% equity and serve as chairman of Strategic Vision, working 25 hours per week maximum. Robert, you'll assume CEO with full operational authority. The company gets professional leadership without divided attention, and I get to be the father Sophie deserves. Sterling's eyes widened with shock and triumph. You're walking away from billions, Daniel. Daniel replied with serene confidence, thinking of Sophie's laugh and Elena's gentle touch. I'm walking towards something infinitely more valuable. The financial impact was staggering. Daniel's net worth plummeted by 60% overnight. But as he drove home that afternoon, knowing he'd never again miss a bedtime story or school play, he felt richer than he'd ever been. Sophie ran to greet him at the door. Daddy, you're home early. I'm going to be home early a lot more often, sweetheart. For the first time in his adult life, Daniel Blackwood had made a decision with his heart instead of his calculator, and it felt like the smartest choice he'd ever made. 8 months after the restructuring, Daniel's new life had settled into a rhythm more beautiful than any corporate symphony he'd ever orchestrated. His morning began at 6:30 a.m., not with market reports and conference calls, but with Sophie climbing into their bed, her hair tousled from sleep and her smile bright enough to power the entire house. Daddy, can we make the Mickey Mouse pancakes today? She'd whisper, careful not to wake Alina, who worked late shifts at Metropolitan General Hospital 3 nights a week. Of course, Princess Daniel would reply, scooping her up for their quiet morning ritual. The kitchen had become his favorite room in their new house, cozy colonial. In Westfield, that was 1/3 the size of his former mansion, but infinitely warmer. Sophie would stand on her special step stool, helping flip pancakes while chattering about her dreams, her friends, and her elaborate plans for when her baby, brother or sister arrived. Alina was 5 months pregnant now, glowing with health and happiness. Her diabetes remained well controlled with proper medication and stress-free living, and she'd flourished in her return to nursing a career she'd abandoned years ago due to financial desperation. You're different, Dr. James Wilson observed during Daniel's weekly therapy session. 6 months ago, you were wound tighter than a Swiss watch. Now, you actually look content. Daniel considered this from the comfortable chair in Dr. Wilson's office, a space that had become crucial for processing his dramatic life transformation. I wake up every morning knowing my purpose, Daniel replied. Before, success was this: moving target, more money, bigger deals, greater market dominance. Now success is Sophie hugging me when I pick her up from school, or Elena laughing at my terrible jokes during dinner. The professional adjustment had been surprisingly smooth. His reduced role at Blackwood Technologies allowed him to focus on long-term strategy and innovation, while Sterling handled daily operations. The company actually performed better. Daniel's strategic vision, combined with Sterling's operational efficiency, created a more balanced leadership structure. Most evenings found the three of them in their living room after dinner, Sophie drawing at her art table while Alina read pregnancy books and Daniel worked on his laptop. The domestic tranquility would have bored him senseless 2 years ago. Now it felt like the greatest luxury imaginable. Daddy, look. Sophie held up her latest masterpiece, a crayon drawing of their family, now including a small bundle representing the baby. It's beautiful, sweetheart. What should we name your little brother or sister? Sophie considered this seriously. If it's a boy, Lucas. If it's a girl, Isabella. Those are royal names for royal families. Elena looked up from her book, catching Daniel's eye with a smile that still made his heart skip beats. They'd been officially dating for 4 months now, taking things slowly despite living together as a family unit. The foundation of friendship and co-parenting had evolved naturally into something deeper and more precious. Their first real date had been dinner at a small Italian restaurant, while Sophie stayed with Mrs. Chen. Over candlelight and wine, they'd talked for hours about everything except Sophia, their own dreams, fears, and the strange magic of finding love in the most unexpected circumstances. I never imagined this, Alina had confessed, her hand intertwined with his across the table. 6 years ago, you were this untouchable billionaire, and I was just a waitress trying to pay nursing school bills. Now look at us. Now look at us. Daniel had agreed, bringing her hand to his lips, building something real. The kiss that followed had been their first, as conscious adults choosing each other, not just two people thrown together by circumstance. And a beautiful daughter. These days, their evening routine included tucking Sophie into her princess bedroom. She decorated herself with Elena's help and Daniel's unlimited arts and crafts budget. They'd read stories, say prayers that included gratitude for their growing family, and Sophie would drift off, secure in the knowledge that both parents would be there in the morning. After Sophie was asleep, Daniel and Elena would sit on their back porch, her head on his shoulder, watching the sunset paint the suburban sky in shades of gold and pink. "Any regrets?" Elena asked one particularly beautiful evening, her hand resting on her growing belly. Daniel considered all he'd given up: the penthouse, the private jet, the sense of being master of a vast empire. Then he felt Sophie's artwork stuck to their refrigerator with magnets, heard Elena humming softly as she folded tiny baby clothes, and thought about the profound peace that filled him every night. "Just one," he said, kissing the top of her head. "I regret that it took me so long to find you both." Amanda Cross stepped out of her black Tesla at Blackwood Technologies headquarters, her Louboutin heels clicking against the marble with the precision of a metronome. 4 years in London had sharpened her already formidable presence designer suit tailored to perfection. Platinum blonde hair styled in an elegant chignon, and green eyes that missed nothing. She was exactly as beautiful and calculating as Daniel remembered. Amanda, Robert Sterling greeted her in the executive lobby, his smile genuine for the first time in months. "London treated you well." "Very well," she replied, her voice carrying the slight British accent she'd acquired during her time managing cross-media's European expansion. "Though I hear Daniel's been distracted since I left." Sterling's expression darkened appropriately. "That's an understatement. Perhaps you should see for yourself." Amanda had returned to reclaim what she'd always considered temporarily misplaced Daniel. Blackwood and the empire they were meant to build together. Their engagement 4 years ago had been more than romance. It was a merger of two powerful dynasties. Her family's media conglomerate combined with his tech empire would have created an unstoppable force in the new digital economy. But Daniel had broken their engagement abruptly, claiming he needed to focus on business expansion. Amanda had accepted the London position, confident that time would bring him to his senses. She hadn't anticipated a 5-year-old obstacle named Sophie. "So this Elena Martinez," Amanda said, reviewing the private investigator's file Sterling had commissioned, "was a waitress who got pregnant and waited 6 years to make her claim. How very opportunistic." "My thoughts exactly," Sterling agreed. "Daniel's been completely manipulated. He's given up 70% of his net worth, reduced his work schedule to part-time, and moved to suburbia. It's embarrassing." Amanda studied the photographs, Daniel pushing Sophie on a swing set, Elena laughing at a backyard barbecue, the three of them looking disgustingly domestic at a school function. "He looks soft," she observed with distaste. "The Daniel I knew was a predator, sharp as a blade. This man in these pictures looks like he's been neutered." The next phase of Amanda's campaign was surgical in its precision. She arranged to accidentally encounter Daniel at Metropolitan Hospital during one of Elena's shifts. The reunion played exactly as she'd orchestrated: surprise, awkward pleasantries, and the inevitable coffee invitation. "You look different," Amanda observed over lattes at the hospital cafe, her manicured fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "Domestic life suits you, I suppose." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Amanda's presence brought back memories of a different version of himself, ambitious, ruthless, emotionally distant. "I'm happy, Amanda. Truly happy for the first time in my adult life. Are you?" Her smile was perfectly calibrated, warm enough to seem genuine, cool enough to plant doubt. "Because the Daniel I knew thrived on challenge, on building empires, on changing the world. Playing house in suburbia seems limiting for someone of your intellectual capacity." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "I have a proposition that might interest you. Cross Industries is launching a revolutionary AI initiative. Military applications, government contracts worth billions. We could dominate the automation industry together, just like we always planned." Daniel felt a familiar stirring, the thrill of massive opportunity, the intoxication of potential power. For a moment, Amanda's vision was intoxicating. The partnership would be professionally rewarding. Amanda continued, her hand almost touching his across the table. "And personally, well, we always did make an excellent team." But then Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Sophie drew you a picture of your business meeting. She says the pretty lady looks like a villain from her princess movies." out of the mouths of babes. See you tonight. Love you. The spell shattered instantly. Amanda, Daniel said firmly, I'm not the man you remember. That man was successful, but empty. This version, the one who reads bedtime stories and makes pancakes shaped like cartoon characters, this is who I was always meant to be. Amanda's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation beneath. You can't tell me that playing daddy to someone else's child is more fulfilling than running a technological empire. Sophie isn't someone else's child. She's mine. And yes, it's infinitely more fulfilling than anything I achieved before her. As Daniel walked away, Amanda's expression hardened into something dangerous. She'd come too far and sacrificed too much to lose Daniel to a suburban fantasy. If he couldn't see reason, perhaps Alina could be made to understand that she was completely out of her league. The real battle for Daniel's soul was about to begin. Amanda's second assault was masterfully orchestrated. She arranged an intimate dinner at La Bernardine, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, under the guise of discussing a revolutionary business opportunity that could change everything. The dining room was a temple of understated elegance, crystal chandeliers, pristine white tablecloths, and the subtle murmur of power brokers conducting million-dollar conversations over perfectly prepared cuisine. This had been Daniel's world for decades, realm where influence was currency and ambition was oxygen. You remember this place, Amanda said, stunning in a midnight blue dress that perfectly complemented her sapphire necklace, a piece worth more than most people's homes. Our last dinner here. He closed the Morrison acquisition, $2 billion in a single handshake. Daniel did remember the intoxication of that moment, the rush of absolute power, the sense that he could reshape entire industries with his will alone. It felt like remembering someone else's life. The AI military contract I mentioned, Amanda continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. It's not just about money, Daniel. We're talking about national security, about positioning America as the dominant technological superpower for the next century. She opened an elegant leather portfolio, revealing classified-looking documents stamped with government seals. The Pentagon wants autonomous defense systems that can think, adapt, and respond faster than human commanders. The first company to crack this will basically write their own check with the US Treasury. Despite himself, Daniel felt his pulse quicken. The technical challenges were staggering. The potential impact were. His mind began automatically calculating algorithms, processing requirements, envisioning solutions. Conservative estimates put the initial contract at $15 billion. Amanda continued, watching his face carefully. But that's just the beginning. Every allied nation will want this technology. We could be looking at $100 billion market within 5 years. The numbers were intoxicating. With that kind of capital, he could fund research initiatives that could revolutionize everything from healthcare to climate change. The positive impact on humanity could be immeasurable. I've assembled the best team money can buy, Amanda pressed. Her advantage: MIT's top AI researchers, former Pentagon strategists, Silicon Valley's most brilliant engineers. But they need someone with your vision to lead them. You're the only person alive who could make this work. Daniel felt the familiar fire of ambition stirring in his chest. This was the kind of challenge he'd been born for: complex, high stakes, world-changing. Part of him missed the intellectual stimulation, the sense of pushing humanity's boundaries forward. And personally, Amanda's voice softened, becoming more intimate. Working together again, we always brought out the best in each other's professional capabilities. Remember Tokyo, the Morrison deal? We were unstoppable when we combined our strengths. Her hand moved across the table, almost touching his eye. No, you think you're happy in your suburban bubble, but deep down, you must feel intellectually understood. A mind like yours needs challenges worthy of its capacity. For a dangerous moment, Daniel wavered. The vision Amanda painted was seductive, returning to the pinnacle of global influence, solving problems that could reshape civilization, working alongside someone who understood and matched his intellectual intensity. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Sophie, sent from Elena's phone. Daddy, baby's sister is kicking really hard tonight. Mama says she's probably going to be a soccer player like me. I can't wait to teach her everything. Love you, infinity times infinity. P.S.I. made you a superhero cape for when you get home because you're my superhero. The words hit him like a lightning bolt of clarity. Amanda, he said quietly, his voice carrying absolute finality. You're offering me the chance to be a king in an empire built on technology and power. But I've already accepted a more important position, which is Sophie's daddy, a partner, a man who shows up for bedtime stories and prenatal appointments and school plays, a man who builds his legacy not in boardrooms, but in the hearts of people who love him unconditionally. Amanda's composed facade finally cracked. You're throwing away the opportunity to shape the future of human civilization for domestic mediocrity. Daniel stood calmly, leaving his napkin beside his untouched entree. I'm not throwing anything away, Amanda. I'm finally choosing what actually matters. As he walked toward the exit, Amanda's voice followed him, sharp with desperation and fury. You'll regret this, Daniel, when you're bored out of your mind playing house, when that little girl grows up and stops thinking you're special, when reality sets in. You'll remember this moment. Daniel paused at the door, turning back with a gentle smile that held no anger, only pity. The only thing I'll regret is that it took me so long to understand the difference between being successful and being significant. 2 years had passed since that pivotal dinner with Amanda, and Daniel's life had blossomed into something more beautiful than any business empire he'd ever imagined. Sophie was now 7 years old, bright, confident, and absolutely certain of her place in a loving family. Alina, radiant in the 7th month of her pregnancy, had become the anchor that kept their world spinning perfectly on its axis. The idea came to him during a quiet Sunday morning in October. Sophie was curled up between her parents in their king-sized bed, reading aloud from her favorite book, while Alina dozed peacefully, her hand resting on her growing belly. Sunlight streamed through their bedroom windows, painting everything in golden warmth, and Daniel felt such profound contentment that it almost took his breath away. This was home. This was love. This was everything he'd never known he was searching for. Sophie, sweetheart, he said softly, how would you feel about helping Daddy with something very special? Her blue eyes, his eyes lit up with curiosity. What kind of special? I want to ask Mama to marry us. All 3 of us. Well, all 4 of us, he corrected, gently patting Elena's belly where their son was growing strong and healthy. Sophie's squeal of delight woke Elena, who blinked in confusion as their daughter bounced excitedly on the mattress. Daddy wants to marry us, Sophie announced breathlessly. We're going to be a real married family. Elena's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Daniel over their daughter's head. Daniel, are you sure? I've never been more certain of anything in my life, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. You tall, 3 of you are my everything. I want to make it official. I want the whole world to know that I choose this, choose us, every single day, for the rest of my life. The proposal itself took place at Metropolitan General Hospital, in the exact spot where their journey had truly begun 2 years earlier. Daniel had arranged everything with the hospital star fairy lights in the small chapel, Sophie's favorite flowers, daisies, because they're happy flowers, and a photographer to capture every precious moment. Alina arrived thinking she was there for a routine prenatal appointment, only to find Daniel waiting in a perfectly tailored suit, holding a ring box that contained a stunning vintage engagement ring, not ostentatious but elegant and timeless, just like the love they'd built together. Sophie stood beside him wearing her prettiest dress, holding a small bouquet and practically vibrating with excitement. Elena Maria Martinez, Daniel began, his voice steady despite the overwhelming emotion in his chest. 2 years ago, you saved my life in ways you'll never fully understand. You didn't just bring me my daughter, you brought me my soul. Tears streamed down Elena's face as he continued. You taught me that true success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you're willing to sacrifice for the people you love. You showed me that being a provider means so much more than writing checks. It means showing up every day with your whole heart. He dropped to one knee, Sophie giggling with delight beside him. You've already made me the luckiest man alive by letting me love you, and Sophie, will you make me the happiest by becoming my wife? Yes, Alina whispered through her tears, then louder. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Sophie cheered as Daniel slipped the ring onto Elena's trembling finger, then swept both his girls into his arms for the kind of embrace that makes time stand still. Later that evening, they visited the cemetery where Elena's parents were buried. It had become their tradition to share important family moments with the grandparents. Sophie had never met but heard countless stories about Mama, Papa, Alina whispered, kneeling beside their headstones with Daniel's steady hand on her shoulder. I want you to meet the man I'm going to marry. This is Daniel, and he's everything you hoped I'd find someday." Daniel knelt beside her, his voice respectful and humble. "Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, I promise you I will spend every day of my life making sure Alina and Sofia and our son know they are cherished, protected, and loved beyond measure. I may have found them late, but I will never take a single moment for granted." Sophie placed her small bouquet of daisies on each grave, chattering cheerfully to her grandparents about the wedding plans, the baby coming, and how her daddy, Daniel, is the best daddy in the whole wide world because he chose to love us on purpose. As they walked back to their car, under a canopy of autumn stars, Alina turned to Daniel with wonder in her eyes. "I used to pray for someone who would love Sophie like she was his own," she said softly. "I never imagined I'd find someone who would love her even more." Daniel pulled his growing family close, Sophie between them and his hand, protective over Elena's belly where their son was safely growing. "She is my own," he said with absolute certainty. "You all are. Biology doesn't make a family choice, does? And I choose you three, every day, for all the days I have left." In the distance, the city lights twinkled like earthbound stars, but Daniel's universe had shrunk to the perfect circumference of his wife-to-be's smile, his daughter's laughter, and the gentle flutter of new life growing beneath his palm, had found his kingdom, and it fit perfectly in his arms. 6 months flew by in a whirlwind of wedding planning, baby preparations, and the beautiful chaos of a family on the verge of becoming officially complete. Sophie, now 8 and full of opinions, had appointed herself chief wedding coordinator. She insisted on lilac bridesmaid dresses, because purple is royal and we're a royal family. Demanded that the ceremony include a special vow section where she could officially become Sophie Martinez Blackwood, and spent hours designing table centerpieces that incorporated both daisies and baby's breath. "Daddy, the flowers have to match baby Lucas's blanket," she announced seriously, holding up fabric samples in the living room that had been transformed into wedding planning headquarters. Lucas Elena had discovered during her latest ultrasound that they were expecting a boy, and Sophie's name choice had stuck. Daniel couldn't wait to hold his son, to be present for every moment he'd missed with Sophie. "How do you know the baby's name is Lucas?" Alina asked, settling carefully onto the couch beside their daughter, her belly now beautifully round at 8 months. "Because when I put my hand here," Sophie placed her small palm on Elena's stomach, "he kicks 3 times. That's Lucas in secret baby code." Daniel looked up from the adoption paperwork spread across his laptop forms that would legally make Sophie his daughter in every way that mattered. The process had been lengthy but straightforward, given that no other father had ever been in the picture. "Speaking of Lucas," Daniel said, "Dr. Patterson wants to see us again next week. Just routine, but we're getting close." Alina glowed with health and happiness, her diabetes perfectly controlled with proper medical care and stress-free living. The transformation from the exhausted, struggling woman he'd met 2.5 years ago was remarkable. "I can't believe in 2 months we'll be married and Lucas will be here," she mused, watching Sophie arrange wedding magazines in precise piles. "I can't believe I almost missed all of this." Daniel replied quietly. Their wedding venue was perfect, Botanical Gardens, where they'd taken Sophie for her first real family photo. Simple, elegant, surrounded by nature's beauty rather than corporate opulence. Robert Sterling had even visited the previous week, bringing a wedding gift, and something Daniel had never expected: an apology. "I was wrong about the family thing," Sterling had admitted awkwardly. "The company's doing better than ever. Turns out, having a CEO who understands work-life balance makes better decisions across the board." Who knew? Dr. Wilson had officially graduated Daniel from therapy, declaring him successfully transformed from workaholic to fully integrated family man. Their sessions had become monthly check-ins, more friendship than professional necessity. As Daniel watched Sophie practice walking down their hallway with an imaginary bouquet, and Alina hum contentedly while folding tiny baby clothes, he realized that happiness wasn't something you achieved, was something you chose. Again and again, in small daily moments. Soon, he'd officially become husband to the woman who saved his soul and legal father to the little girl who taught him how to love unconditionally. The final chapter of his old life was closing, and the first page of forever was about to begin. The morning sun painted the Botanical Gardens in shades of gold and emerald as Daniel Blackwood prepared to become officially what he'd been in his heart for 3 years, husband and father. Sophie, radiant in her lilac dress, with a crown of daisies in her hair, stood before the mirror in the bridal cottage, practicing her walk one final time. "Remember, Daddy, when they ask if anyone objects, I get to say I object to waiting any longer." She giggled, having rehearsed this joke for weeks. "That's my girl." Daniel laughed, adjusting his tie with hands that trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from overwhelming gratitude. Alina appeared in the doorway, breathtaking in her simple ivory gown that accommodated her 9-month pregnancy beautifully. Baby Lucas was due any day, adding an element of beautiful uncertainty to their perfect day. "Are you ready, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with joy. "I've been ready since the moment Sophie called me Daddy in that hospital corridor," he replied, taking her hands in his. The ceremony was intimate. 50 guests who truly mattered, including Mrs. Chen, Dr. Wilson, Elena's nursing colleagues, and even Robert Sterling, who'd grown surprisingly fond of Sophie during company picnics. As Alina walked down the petal-strewn aisle, escorted by Sophie, who beamed like a small sun, Daniel felt his chest expand with emotion so profound it nearly staggered him. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we gather today to celebrate not just the union of Daniel and Alina, but the official formation of a family built on love, sacrifice, and the beautiful truth that families are created by choice, not just chance." Their vows brought tears to every eye. Alina promised to continue believing in the man Daniel was becoming, while he vowed to spend every remaining day proving worthy of the trust she and Sophie had placed in him. But the most powerful moment came when Sophie stepped forward with the rings, the adoption papers visible in the minister's hands. "Daniel Blackwood," the minister announced, "by the power vested in me by the state and witnessed by this community, you are now legally the father of Sophie Martinez Blackwood." Sophie's squeal of joy rang through the gardens as she launched herself into Daniel's arms. "Now it's official, Daddy. Now and forever, sweetheart. Now and forever." 5 months later, baby Lucas arrived healthy, perfect, and immediately adored by his big sister, who appointed herself his personal protector and entertainment director. Daniel held his son for the first time in the same hospital where this extraordinary journey had begun, Alina sleeping peacefully beside them. Sophie curled in the chair drawing pictures of their complete family. As he gazed down at Lucas's tiny face, a perfect blend of his features and Elena's gentle spirit, Daniel reflected on the miraculous transformation of his life. 3.5 years ago, he'd been a billionaire with everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. Tonight, he was a man of more modest means but infinite wealth, a husband who came home to laughter and love, a father who never missed bedtime stories, a partner in the most important enterprise of all, building a family. "Look what we made, Daddy," Sophie whispered, gently touching her brother's hand. "We made the most perfect family in the whole world." "Yes, sweetheart," Daniel whispered back, his voice thick with emotion as he watched his son's fingers curl around Sophie's. "We absolutely did." Outside the hospital window, the city sparkled with a million lights, but Daniel's universe had found its perfect center in the circle of his family's love. The end.